Yep. All right. So call to order, pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Attendance, Neil Mascola. Here. AJ Boris. Here. Ellie Bronco. Here. Tommy Turner. Here. And I'd like to welcome Francis Santana to the board as an alternate. All right. So let's start off with the approval of the meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Got that? All right, so we want to,
You can go, yeah, because we're past 6:05 now.
all right, so we're going to open the public hearing for the proposed special permit application for 1 megawatt solar panel facility for the property located at 0 Bosco Drive, applicant Trident American LLC. So what we want to try to do is have the public speak first before we get any questions. You want to do? So how we want to do?
If you want to allow the public. is there
Yeah,
anything-
let's allow the public first. Laura?
Yeah, just looking to see. Okay, Christine, if you want to unmute. Christine, you're the Nelly.
Do you want to change the screen view?
There.
I got it. Can you hear me?
Here.
Hello?
Go ahead. We can hear you.
Good. Christine Yanelli, Chestnut Street. I'm a member of the Naugatuck Conservation. I am a Naugatuck Conservation Commissioner, and I'm a member of the Connecticut Votes for Animals and Wildlife. I'm a member of the Western Connecticut Bird Club and a member of Sierra Club. I have been an environmentalist my entire life, and I do not live in the Bosco Drive vicinity. My parents and grandparents grew up in Naugatuck, and yes, I live here, grew up here, and raised my children here, and care very much about the current and future ecological health of Naugatuck's woodlands, running brooks, wildlife, wetlands, topography, trees, flora and fauna, and connections between all of these. No one wants to see a change in this area, Bosco Drive solar farm. The community neighborhood citizens love and reasonably state their concerns about the environment, ecological connections, and the wildlife living in this area. Tearing and cutting down of trees and plants in this area will certainly change this natural area and displace wildlife. Then again, it isn't only the trees and other vegetation that will be lost, but the countless amounts of wildlife, such as mammals, migrating and native birds, pollinators, amphibians, and many other beings that make their home here. We are removing a piece of ourselves when we no longer allow for animals to exist as they always have in this area. Without the helpful essential trees and plants that absorb excess groundwater, there will be nothing to regulate the excess water from heavy downpours, as we have witnessed these past years, and the soil thus becomes oversaturated in surrounding areas. There should be a hold put on the solar farm construction until an environmental impact is done, as well as contacting the state archaeologist for a report of the historical significance of this land area. I am raising awareness in my community because there is much forest loss and woodland destruction going on and is part of global warming. Forests that are intact help prevent flooding and droughts by regulating rainfall. Cutting trees and destroying plants has a very negative impact on our environment and the quality of our lives. We do not need green areas turned into brown fields. We need brown fields turned into flourishing green fields. Bosco Drive Solar Farm is in the wrong place. Thank you.
Next, Melissa Leonard.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having, continuing this public hearing. My name is Melissa Leonard. I live at 450 Guntown Road in Naugatuck. I'm also a conservation commissioner, and I just want to echo all the sentiments that Christine Yanelli just made. I don't really have anything more to say, but I just want to say I agree 100%. This is not the appropriate place for a solar field. And I hope that you'll consider the neighborhood and how it fits in with that in your decision. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public would like to speak? Please raise your hand. Joel Green is the attorney. right?
Yeah, we figured we'd do public and then we'd go to Joel.
I don't have anybody else at this time.
Let's go to Joel.
Attorney Joel.
Okay, Attorney Green?
Thank you. Thanks very much. Once again, for the record, Joel Green of the law offices of Green and Gross, representing Inga and Anthony Oren, who own a budding property to the property that's the subject of this application. So I have a lot of comments, and there's a lot to talk about on this application. But, you know, I think fundamentally, I just wanted to comment. First of all, I appreciate the work that this commission does, and indeed all zoning commissions. And I know that you always have the best interests of your town in mind and of the borough in mind, and that the regulations are really your expression of what is just, fair, and reasonable in terms of the use of property. And I also appreciate the fact that you have tried to sort of embrace this clean energy idea with solar panels and the use of solar panels as a means of clean energy. So I guess the first comment I would make is that, you know, we look at solar panels and we look at electric vehicles, and there's this whole notion of, you know, this is clean energy and this is progress, and I understand that. But I often wonder with electric vehicles and with solar panels, whether from dust to dust, whether they are truly, if you look more closely at what's involved with a solar panel and what's involved in constructing it and what's involved when its useful life is over, just as we look at car batteries, I often question, and I suppose it depends on who you ask, what the ultimate outcome is at the end of the day, and whether a Tesla is more environmentally responsible at the end of the day than a Suburban, you know, when you consider that. But I do appreciate sort of the progress and the progressive idea. But I wonder if this commission, when I look at the sort of the notes on your interpretation of your regulations, and I'll talk about that later, whether this is what you contemplated, whether you actually contemplated an 11-acre solar farm in a residential zone adjacent, right next door to properties such as my clients. Is this really, I find it hard to believe that this is what this commission had in mind when you interpreted that regulation to be like a transmission tower. Were you really thinking that a project such as this would result? And I certainly understand, you know, again, that we're dealing with solar panels and that you want to sort of cover this in your regulations, but I have to believe that you were more thinking on rooftops on homes or small installations in people's yards and residential zones. But I'm going to talk about the adoption and sort of the process later. For the moment, the first thing I'd like to talk about is, and the first question I have is, I note that the town engineer had comments today, and I'm in receipt of his letter, and I saw it on the website, a letter dated December 15th, wherein the town engineer lists a number of defects, or not defects, but missing information in the application. So I guess my first question for the commission, and I suppose the applicant, is whether the commission contemplates continuing this hearing further to allow that information, or whether the commission anticipates closing the public hearing this evening. So I suppose that's my first question, Mr. Chairman, because once again, I note that Mr. Stewart had requested quite a bit of information that would alter potentially the site plans and many of the things that we might address this evening.
So we haven't made a decision on what we're going to do. We're going to listen to the comments and then make a decision.
Okay, so so I would suggest then that I'll just put on the record, just so that the record is complete, that certainly to the extent that the commission does continue the matter, and to the extent that the plans are amended to incorporate some of the information that the town engineer requested, that obviously that the opportunity for public comment be held open to respond to those materials. It is also our position. So our position is that at present, the application is incomplete because it does not have a lot of the information that was requested. Another issue that I noted, and you'll forgive me because I'm really new. Well, I've been at this for 38 years. This is my first opportunity to appear in Naugatuck. So I'm, sort of, I've read your regulations, but I note that along with a special permit application, your regulations require the submission of an application for a certificate of zoning compliance. And I don't see such an application accompanying this application based on the materials online. Is the commission or the zoning enforcement officer able to confirm whether that document was submitted by the applicant?
We do not have that, but we generally issue zoning compliance certificates after.
Okay, well, I just want to note that amongst the application requirements, when it is submitted, under 33.3 of the regulations, application for a special permit shall be submitted in writing to the zoning enforcement officer, shall be accompanied by an application for certificate of zoning compliance. So I would suggest that that had to happen at the time that the application for special permit was submitted, unless there's some other regulation that I'm unaware of. So I would submit that. The next piece that I wanted to get into was, I note that the applicant's drawings are also incomplete in many respects. And among them are, I note that in reviewing the site plan, the applicant has not dealt with the issue of lot building coverage. And in reviewing the application documents, I note that the applicant does not provide any data at all on coverage for the proposed development. Under your regulations, there is a definition of building, and it talks about a structure having a roof supported by columns, but it also says, except as otherwise indicated, building as used in these regulations shall be deemed to include structures. The definition of structures says a structure shall mean anything constructed or erected which requires location on the ground or is attached to something having a location on the ground. And then it talks about other than stairs and landings. I note that solar panels are not excluded from that definition. So obviously then in looking at the coverage definition, it contemplates building area. And I would suggest that the applicant didn't offer any information on those sorts of dimensions and what is actually covered in terms of maximum lot building coverage. So that's obviously something that we would submit, should have been included. I'm unable to make that calculation because the data is a little thin in terms of what's contemplated in terms of the actual panel area. So the application is based on these sorts of requirements is incomplete. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I don't know if the commission has any questions at this juncture on anything that I've raised thus far.
No, keep on going.
Okay. Hearing none, I next want to talk about some of the reasons why my clients and I believe that this application really should be denied. I note that under section 33.3, the requirements for a special permit are set forth in the regulations. And in section 33.5 and 33.7, 33.5 provides general considerations for this commission. 33.7 speaks to general standards, and 33.5 says, in addition to the general standards and any special standards for particular uses that may hereinafter be specified, the Borough Zoning Commission shall consider the following before acting on a special permit application. 33.7 speaks to general standards that shall apply to all special permit uses. And 33.5.1 requires this commission to consider the size and intensity of the proposed use and the size of the lot on which it is located. And this goes back to my original comment as to this intense use of an 11-acre parcel for a massive solar farm facility in a residential zone. And we would, I mean, I can only say that if I put myself, and I would ask you to put yourself in the shoes of my clients being right next door to this facility, and just the size and mass and intensity of this use sitting there. And I know that the applicant had submitted a sort of a projected photo from my client's property. And I think it's kind of horrifying the way the forest is completely eliminated by virtue of this project. So I would urge the commission to consider that in looking at this application. The next issue that I'm going to go a little bit out of order here, but I have Mr. Trinkus back, and I note that the applicant had provided a response to Mr. Trinkus's letter to the commission dated November 16, and the applicant had provided comments to that. Mr. Trinkus is with us tonight, and although he is presently on the West Coast and it's only 3:30 there, I'm going to ask him to check in. He has had an opportunity to look at the comments. I had forwarded the engineer's comments as well. And so on the issues of, and this goes to 33.5.7, which speaks to drainage and erosion problems, and also 33.5.12, which speaks to drainage considerations that shall include effects on land which the drainway passes through, and also the effect on those offsite areas ultimately receiving said drainage, whether within the development or not. And I've asked Mr. Trinkus to comment both in terms of the response by the applicant, but also to sort of go through some of the salient portions of his report that address those two standards.
Good evening, members of the Zoning Commission. My name is Steve Trinkus. I'm a licensed professional engineer with an office in Southbury, Connecticut. And as Attorney Green pointed out, I'm out here in California for a conference. in reviewing the applicant's response to my letter, many of the issues remain very much unaddressed. Your town engineer brings up some very valid points, which I'm in concurrence with. His initial comments concern the soil borings done by the applicant. They had a geotechnical consultant go out to the site, with the exception of B1, which was done in the corner of infiltration basin number 1, the closest one to Bosco Drive, and that's shown on, I think it's sheet GD1, the first grading plan. They found refusal, which is taken as another word for bedrock, at 4 feet below the bottom of the basin. On the upper side of the basin, that basin is almost 4 feet below grade. The DEP manual requires a 3-foot separation to either seasonal groundwater or bedrock. So if you have bedrock at 4 feet and your cut is almost to 4 feet, you simply are not in compliance with the standards of the DEP manual from 2004. It's particularly critical for infiltration practices to have an unsaturated zone under the basin for some place for the water to go to. And if you've got bedrock, you're not going to infiltrate into bedrock. Furthermore, the eastern basin, which is shown on sheet GD2, there is no test boring in that basin at all. Many of the test borings were done within the area of the array because the post systems for solar arrays need to be put into a certain depth where the soil resistance to the posts will prevent uplift forces, i.e. the wind on the panels. And that's the primary purpose of the geotechnical evaluation. Mr. Stewart also brings up a concern of these 2-level spreaders, primarily the one for the basin closer to Bosco Drive, because it's right above a steep slope that is right above a residential house. The applicant's detail for the level spreader is it's a stone-filled trench with a very low earth berm now covered with an erosion blanket on the downhill side. I will tell you, based on 40 years of designing and seeing things in the field, it's nice that we can think that we can grade an earth berm to be absolutely dead level from one end to the other, but it never stays that way. Dirt simply settles over time. A tree branch could fall on it and create a little dimple in the top of it, but an earth berm is not something that's going to give you level flow. And what will happen is water in that level spreader of crushed stone will find the one spot that is lower than any other place, and it will flow out of that one spot. And therefore it becomes concentrated flow, not overland flow, going down a pretty significant slope right towards the existing residential structure. And what will happen over time, and depending on the rainfall, and it's particularly a concern because we're seeing more short duration, high intensity storms where you can get, 2 inches in an hour and a half, or you could get 3 inches in 2 hours. But you get a lot of water in a hurry. And what will happen is the concentrated flow will cause erosion of the upland slope, and that eroded material will wind up being deposited somewhere downstream, possibly in the neighbor's yard or against their house on the western side of the basin. On the eastern side of the site, similarly, that level spreader is above a steep slope. And again, these slopes naturally, under the wooded environment today do not see concentrated flows because the trees, whether the leaves are on them or they're just the branches now, do break up the rainfall falling on the ground. Plus you have a litter layer under the trees, and that litter layer is really nice, fluffy, organic material, mostly decomposed leaves, which you'd kind of expect in a forest. And therefore you never get concentrated flow in the wooded environment. And I'd like to just point out for the record that, in addition to being a licensed engineer, my Bachelor of Science in college was forest management. So my comments regarding forestry and what happens in a wooded environment are as an expert in the field of forestry based upon my education. So these level spreaders are not going to give you level flow. They're going to wind up with concentrated flow causing erosion and downstream sedimentation. This occurred in a solar array in East Lyme that I was retained to review after the fact. And even 4 years after it was built, there's still issues with concentrated flow coming off the developed solar array. But during the construction period, they had 2 back-to-back about 1.5-inch rainstorms and 30 acres of bare soil and about 400 metric tons of sediment washed into the Niantic River that was 4,000 feet away. So to get a sediment plume almost a mile away, you know, it doesn't take much on a site. And again, you're clear cutting the site here. Some of it is meadow, a lot of it is woods. The current topography is also generally running in multiple directions. Some of it runs to the west-southwest, some of it runs due south towards our client's property, and further areas drain to the east. Now, the detail that the applicant shows for this level spreader system, this came out of the state of Maryland. This is a stormwater standard from Maryland, which our Connecticut DEP has adopted. However, the idea is per Maryland is that there is a stone-filled trench, and they don't really dimension it, that is built under the 2 drip lines of the array. Typical arrays have 2 sets of panels with about 1 inch or 1/2 inch gap between them. They're about 1 meter by 2 meter panels. And the trenches are supposed to be level. So they have to follow the contour to be level. In the case of the middle of this array, if you look at sheet GD1 or GD2 for that matter, these rows, you know, are set up running north and south, and they're running perpendicular to the contour. So there is anywhere between 8 and 10 foot of elevation difference from the north end of the array to the south end of the array. So if you put a stone-filled trench under that drip line of the panels, and again, I understand these panels are not on fixed posts, they're on a singular post and will rotate from due east, you know, through due south and all the way to due west, tracking the sun during the day. And then I assume they rotate back to the eastern position at the end. But a trench located along the eastern drip line of these panels is not going to be level. It is going to have 8 to 10 foot of pitch from the upper end to the lower end. And what's going to happen is you just created a effectively curtain drain that is going to quickly convey that water from the north end all the way to the south, and there's no provisions to deal with it at the other end. So the concept of level spreaders, it might sound nice, but A, they're not shown on the plan, nor can you build them in this particular site. A level spreader must be level. That is the operative word for these trenches. So it has to follow a contour line, not go across it, not go uphill, not go downhill, but it has to be dead level. And those, if you did that on these contours, as they would be perpendicular to the rows of the panels, they're going to be extremely ineffective because they're not going to catch the water that's intended to be caught at that point. The applicant also proposes to use the infiltration basins as sedimentation basins. The 2004 DEP manual strongly discourages that because sediment basins are designed to trap fine sediments during the active construction process. The problem is it is next to impossible to restore an infiltration basin after you've used it as a temporary sediment basin. It only takes 1/8 inch or sometimes less, depending on the particular material, of fine sediments to clog the native soil surface. So once you've finished using a basin as a sedimentation basin, you've got to, you know, remove all of that accumulated sediment. You have to somehow restore the native infiltrative capacities. And it's nice in theory, it does not work in practicality. Additionally, the DEP manual, again, strongly suggests that infiltration basins are designed to infiltrate the water quality volume and not have all of the water directed to them. In going to a lot of low impact development conferences, and that's my area of expertise, there have been numerous case studies in the past 7 or 8 years where infiltration basins were built and all of the stormwater from a particular development was directed to them. And these basins were actually located in sand and gravel soils, very good infiltrating soils. And because all of the water was directed into them, it stirs up the surface, and these basins failed within a year to 2 years after being constructed because they are not designed to accept all water like a standard detention pond. In the geotechnical report, they're again taking soil infiltration data from the NRCS Web Soil Survey. It is not based on field testing. So, you cannot use that soil data. The NRCS data has a wide range of infiltration rates, or sometimes an order of magnitude from the low end to the high end. You need field infiltration rates, and we don't have them. Additionally, infiltration basins must have a forebay to trap sediment and other organic debris which can clog the infiltrative surface. These basins do not have a forebay at all. Let's see. I made a bunch of comments in my review letter about decommissioning plans, and the applicant's response is, well, we're going to provide a decommissioning plan subject to Eversource's approval. Well, here's the reality. These solar arrays have to be taken apart after 20, 25 years. And these panels are not easily recyclable. There is a company in Falls River, Massachusetts that does all kinds of large scale recycling, and they will accept solar panels. But whoever has the solar panels is paying this company $55 a panel, giving them to this company. Whatever materials the company gets out of the panel is the profit of that company. So there is a substantial cost to the owner of a solar array in the decommissioning. And if there is no bond or there's no accurate estimate of a decommissioning plan, in 25 years, you may find that the entity for this solar farm is no longer legally viable. And you've got a solar array that is sitting out there, not generating power, and yet nobody's coming to take it apart. So then that falls to the borough of Naugatuck to either leave it in place, which is not an environmentally sound idea, or to pay the cost of decommissioning that and getting rid of the panels. Other places that these panels go is either to landfills, or they are shipped over to third world countries where if you're, I guess, living in a poor mud shack somewhere in Africa and you have no power whatsoever, putting a panel or two on your roof that gives you a little electricity is great, except then the disposal problem becomes another country's problem and not ours. So the decommissioning plan needs to have a dollar amount affixed to it of what the reality cost is. And there should be a bond required by the municipality to ensure that that you have that bond for the duration of the project, so that if the developer is no longer around in 25 years, the town has, or in this case, the borough has the funds to, restore the site. This is partially a forested site. And I think this was raised at the last public hearing that, a forest does not happen overnight. A forest is a series of successional growth from a meadow. Mother Nature does not like a vacuum. So you start out with, a mowed lawn as an example. If you don't mow your lawn, it's going to kind of turn into a meadow. As it goes from a meadow, you'll get some larger herbaceous plants growing there. You'll get some brush coming in, and ultimately you get two types of trees: early successional, which are poplars and beech that grow in bright sun. And then you get northern hardwoods, which are more shade tolerant, and they eventually colonize the area, and the younger trees that can only handle sunlight die off. But that process takes 25 years to occur. So restoring a site under these solar arrays, basically what the developers really mean is they'll take everything out of there, they'll rough grade it, they'll seed it with grass, and they walk away. So you're not getting a restored site to what the condition is today. And I completely agree with the first person, Christine, I believe, that spoke about, the environmental aspects. A forest provides tremendous reduction in carbon storage, both in the trees, any other vegetation, and in the soils, sometimes down to a meter. And when you clear cut that site, whatever has been stored in that soil is basically lost, and it doesn't come back for, again, years later until the ecosystem is redeveloped. Large ground mounted solar should be placed on landfills. It should be placed on large building roofs. But this follows up with Attorney Green, cutting down a forest, if you're concerned about carbon dioxide, is the last thing you should do, because a tree between 10 and 80 years old, which is the average lifespan of a New England forest, will sequester 48 pounds of carbon per year. And on average in New England, there's 100 trees per acre. So it's easy to do the math out of how much carbon loss of carbon storage that you are losing when you clear cut a forest. The bottom line, in my professional opinion, with the short notice of the reviews of this information, is the plans are not in compliance with your regulations, nor are they in compliance with the guidelines from Connecticut DEP for the design of these practices. They are not going to function as intended and will result in both on-site and off-site adverse impacts due to increased stormwater management, because we're not going to get the infiltration that the applicant claims in their report. Thank you.
So, Steve, just so we're clear, and just to sort of zoom out to 10,000 feet again, the adverse impact is in plain language that there will be erosion and flooding downhill from this property.
Yes.
And that is your professional opinion.
Yes, it is.
All right. So, so it would be, once again, based on Mr. Trinkus's testimony, it would be our position that this application does not satisfy sections, the standards for granting a special permit. And we urge you to deny it on that basis. And I'm referring to 33.5.12, and I'm referring to 33.5.7. And also under general standards, obviously, if it has adverse impact on off-site properties, we would claim a denial on that basis. Now, just to follow up on Mr. Trinkus's comments, I note in reviewing your regulations that you specifically say under special permits, and actually they're on the specific sections that you, I guess, recently adopted regarding New Haven Road and Rubber Avenue, or I guess more recently than the original adoption, that this commission specifically finds that stormwater management plans must comply with the deep standards. And I would suggest that a similar interpretation by this commission in a residential zone would be appropriate and actually require equal protection, so that obviously we would suggest that the commission should similarly require that this development fully comply with the stormwater manual, which once again is known to the engineering world as the best practices. So that covers the erosion issue. The next issue that we'd like to get into relates to section 33.5.4 of the general considerations, and under general standards 33.7.2 as it relates to impact on property values in the neighborhood. And it's interesting to me that the applicant offered nothing for this commission on the issue of impacts on neighboring properties in terms of value. And we would like to, I'd like to present Vincent Guardiano, who is with us this evening. And Mr. Guardiano is an appraiser. And initially, I would ask Mr. Guardiano to describe his education, training, and experience for the record.
You have to unmute, please.
Can you hear me now? Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, my name is Vincent Guardiano. I'm a commercial real estate appraiser. I've been doing appraisal work for approximately 20 years. I've done been working in the Valley, New Haven, and the Upper Fairfield County area for like the last 25 years, doing mostly residential and commercial real estate appraisal work. I will say this, that in my experience, I've also served on the Planning and Zoning Commission in my hometown for 10 years in Derby, Connecticut, and have been involved with a number of highest and best use analysis for similar situations like this. Okay. And what I was hired to come and look at the impact of the effect of putting a industrial landscape along a residential property. And in general, let me just speak generally speaking, because I just want to specify, I did not do a direct impact study on this particular property. But in general, I'd like to talk about a couple things. Anytime you have a residential property that's going to be impacted by something outside of the property, okay, it's generally going to have either a positive or a negative impact. In this particular case, you're going to have an industrial use, an industrial landscape of this solar farm, okay, adjoining residential properties. And in general, that's a classic example of what we call external obsolescence in residential appraisal work, okay? And what that means is most types of residential appraisals, there's a number of things that can affect value. Obviously, physical depreciation can affect value. Functional obsolescence can affect value. An example of functional obsolescence would be if you have a house that only has one bathroom with 5 bedrooms, okay? Obviously, you have a deficiency in the property because you need more than one bathroom in a 5-bedroom property. In this particular case, you have what they call external obsolescence, and it's classic, okay? If you have the option of buying a property that is located, and let me regress a little bit. External obsolescence has to do with influences outside of the subject property itself, okay? So if you have a residential home and you're situated in a residential neighborhood, such as we have here, if you have the opportunity to buy this house, and in this particular case, you have forestry, or if you had some housing there, okay, what would be the difference between buying that house or buying another house in a similar neighborhood that would have a factory across the street or commercial, high-speed residential commercial use across the street? Obviously, no matter how you look at it, okay, that property that doesn't have the negative influences on it will be worth more, okay? Particularly in this particular market, as we all know, it's been a buyer's market. There's been no properties available, okay? But what happens 2 years from now when this COVID virus is all gone and property values start to stabilize, okay? If you have the opportunity, and it becomes all of a sudden becomes a seller's market, okay? Becomes a buyer's market, okay? And you have properties that you have a choice, okay? Which property would you choose? Would you want the property that's behind a beautiful residential property or forestry? Or would you want a property that's behind an industrial complex? Okay, it's pretty obvious, okay? So no matter what anybody tells you about the studies that are done for this type of property, okay, it's always, it's common sense. Put yourself in that position. Where would you want to be? Would you want to be the house that's facing the factory? Would you want to be a house that's facing an industrial landscape? Or would you want to be a house that's facing other residential properties or a beautiful forestry landscape? Okay, it's common sense. Okay, so the question is, does a property that's impacted by a solar panel, does it affect the value of the surrounding properties? Put yourself in that position of a buyer. Which one would you affect? Which one would you consider as something that's going to influence your neighborhood. If you were the one of the property owners directly around this property, okay? And I will say it's common sense. Now, could I say it's 10%? Could I say it's 20%? Could I say it's 30% property value? I don't know, because an impact study is very, very expensive, and it's not fair on the property owners to have to do that. As a commission, I would say to you that it's your responsibility to make sure that they did an impact study. And of course, I'm going to give you some information because I'm in the business. I did look at this, okay? And every impact study that's done by the electric company or someone's going to provide this, okay, is going to say it doesn't have an impact on it, okay? But if you look at independent impact studies, such as the one by the University of Rhode Island and so forth, you'll find that they say it does have an impact on the property values. And what do you think as a property owner? If you live in this community, what do you think that it does? You don't have to be an expert. I've been doing this for 30 years, okay, 35 years. What do you think as a property owner? Okay, if you don't believe, just put yourself in their position. They have a beautiful home. My clients came from New York. They found a beautiful home. They recognize that they have some residential property behind them. Okay, they come here, they invest in your community, and they want to stay here and they want to raise their family. Now all of a sudden they're going to put an industrial complex behind them, and I say that. It's not like you could say whatever you want about the type of improvements they're going to make that you can't see it. I saw the videos. Okay, that's hogwash. These industrial solar panels are tall. Tell me if you were right behind them, if you wouldn't hear them, if you wouldn't see them. Okay, and tell me that would not have an effect on your property value. Okay, if you could say that honestly, okay, then you know what? Then no matter what I say is not going to matter. Okay, because you know that that is not the case. No matter what you say, that will have a negative impact on property values around it. Now, the other thing I want to say, as far as being a planner, if you look at the situation that you have over here, you have your X amount of acreage with this subject property. North of that, you have another piece of property owned by Naugatuck. To the east of that, another piece of property owned by the state of Connecticut, okay? And to the east of that property, you have, I'm looking at my, excuse me for 1 second, I'm looking at my GIS, okay? You have a strip of land that extends all the way to the Whitmore Glen State Park Reserve, which extends to Route 63. Okay, you have a piece of property that, if you had any idea of what you're doing, okay, you would never put a industrial property right there. This is a perfect connection, okay, to connect Route 63 to the forest land on the other side of the state. Excuse me, of the city. Okay, that would bring you an extension all the way to Bosco Road, which would extend to Cordell Road. Okay, this town of Naugatuck, or the borough of Naugatuck, is missing a golden opportunity here, okay, to extend their open space. And after you just heard the information provided by our engineer, okay, about the effect of what the solar panels would do on the environment. This would do much more if the town would acquire this property on its own. Okay, my recommendation is to acquire this property because you're missing a golden opportunity. But either way, the use of a industrial situation within a residential zone is not fair to the surrounding property owners, and it's an embarrassment to the town of Naugatuck, the borough of Naugatuck. Okay, this does not belong there. Okay, and that's my professional opinion, and I've done this for a long time. If anybody wants to argue or debate this with me, I'm available anytime you want to talk about it. Okay. This particular use is, this would be if you were studying land use development in a college pro forma, anybody want to take this, they would look at this as the worst situation you could do. And I hold it upon you folks because I was there. Listen, sometimes you're going to make a decision. Okay. Sometimes you have to make a decision. And this is not the best use of this property. It's an embarrassment. Okay. And this would be a classic example of what you don't do. Okay. In the land development. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer anything you have to talk about.
So once again, section 33.5 under general considerations requires that this commission consider the effect on property values, and that's in 33.5.4. And under general standards, 33.7.2 of your regulation says that the site plan and architectural plans shall be of a character as to harmonize with the neighborhood, to accomplish a transition in character, and it says to protect property values. So, Mr. Guardiano, in your, based on your education, training, and experience, then just for the record, it is your professional opinion that this proposed development does not achieve either of those objectives. Is that correct?
It severely impacts, and the studies made out there, which were brought up in the last meeting, about the influence on the damage to property values. And as it gets further away, it gets diminished. But the property values surrounding this property are severely damaged, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's called economic obsolescence, and it's classic. Okay,
Thank you.
there's no argument about it. It's classic.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if any members of the commission have any questions for Mr. Guardiano or for Mr. Trinkus.
No.
Thank you. Okay. So, these are matters, especially on valuation, which the applicant utterly failed to address in any way. And there's, as I've watched this commission over the last few hearings, I know that you recognize sort of the process for public hearings. And I often, I talk about this, and I've done quite a bit of work on this, and this is a public hearing. It's not a workshop. And so the ordinary flow of business, and as I know this commission recognizes, is that the applicant submits an application, it presents its application, the public has an opportunity to comment, and then typically the applicant has an opportunity to respond. Now, I appreciate the patience of this commission, and I appreciate kind of the practical considerations. And indeed, you continued this hearing to this evening, which we appreciate, and gave us an opportunity to review the applicant's materials. But I would suggest that the commission not allow the applicant to now essentially file a new application and sort of fill in these infirmities in its application, because these things end up becoming very circular. And once again, if the applicant were to submit new material or new materials addressing these infirmities in its plan and sort of incomplete items, then we start all over again, I guess, with public comment, and we circle. So I would urge the commission not to continue the public hearing for that purpose. But the next thing I want to talk to the commission about, and I'll try to go quickly because I appreciate the courtesy of your hearing me and allowing me this time. And I don't mean to, and again, I respect your time. But one thing that can't be overcome by the applicant is the fact that the proposed use does not comply with the language of your zoning regulations. Specifically, there is no section under land uses that allows a solar panel array such as this in this zone. It is not a permitted use. Now, I am familiar and I've reviewed your regulations regarding sort of the process here on interpretation of zoning regulations pursuant to section 3.6. And once again, I understand that this commission is trying to do the right thing for this community in addressing solar panels. But let me just, I just want to talk about this sort of legal issue that exists in your regulations. And it goes like this. Your regulations in section 54 have a sort of a very good process for the adoption of zoning regulations. And there is a process that you have that talks about standards for amendments, and it requires a public hearing, and it requires public notice, and it apprises the public of really what you're doing. And once again, your regulations are an expression of what is just, fair, and reasonable. Now, on the first bounce, I will tell you that during COVID, I reviewed your regulations, and there is nothing in your regulations online as they exist that talks about any interpretation of the section pertaining to land uses that would allow solar panels. So that's item one. So it is not published on the website and published in your regulations. So the public has no idea of that interpretation. So your regulations say in section 3.6 that that it discusses this concept of when a question arises as to the exact intent of the regulations, the zoning commission shall by resolution determine the precise meaning, giving due consideration, among other factors, to all applicable sections of these regulations and previous interpretations made by the commission. But what actually happened here was back in August, under new business, you had this interpretation in your regulations, and you considered this interpretation, which was presented by Mr. Carter. And I did speak to Mr. Carter because I was curious about it. First of all, there's no file and there's no documents regarding the interpretation. So there was nothing to look at. And that's, I didn't go to the office, but that's what my understanding was from him. And essentially what happened here was it was, again, under new business, and it spoke in terms of, and I'm just going to go to the agenda that you had. And it said under new business, commission interpretation requests that a private 1 megawatt solar generator project is a transmission facility as categorized in section 23. So I would suggest, first of all, that there was no public hearing on this item where you issued this interpretation. And essentially, and you'll pardon me because I don't mean to be critical, but there's an old saying where basically in this case, the commission basically said that an elephant is a giraffe because we were talking about transmission towers and an 11-acre basic, look at this site plan and look at the volume of surface of solar panel that exists on this 11-acre site. And this commission, by interpretation, essentially changed dramatically the meaning of your zoning regulations. And once again, there was no notice of a public hearing or ability of the public to participate. And yet I see that in the minutes of the meeting that I see that an attorney Fitzpatrick was able to participate in the hearing. Certainly my clients did not have notice that this would be a public hearing process, nor did they even know that this was going forward. I understand that there may have been a notice, but under new business, this didn't begin to educate the public about the notion that you were going to start calling transmission towers solar panels and vice versa. So that's item one. I note that in the minutes, it says in the minutes that the solar panel array, it would require 5 to 10 acres. And yet in this instance, you have 11 acres. And you also, in the interpretation, spoke to an interpretation that a solar panel project that is privately owned and under 1 megawatt in size. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that if the General Electric Corporation or any publicly traded corporation owned the property, that they could not have a solar panel array, but a privately owned piece of property can have a solar panel? Does it mean that the town of Naugatuck, for example, a municipality in a residential zone, cannot have a solar panel, but a private citizen can? So in that instance, and I know you're familiar with this concept, so I won't spend a lot of time, but you're regulating the user and not the use, when really it's the use, it's the solar panel, and who owns it should not be a factor. So I take issue kind of with what was done and how it was done. But significantly, I would suggest that a court would not allow this sort of, it's basically a text amendment, where basically using this interpretation, it allowed solar panel use, which in my view is sort of and with all due respect, again, is sort of a tortured interpretation of transmission and communication tower. And once again, the public did not have a full and fair opportunity to understand the impact of what really is a text amendment, didn't have an opportunity to comment, although I guess some of the public was allowed to comment, but it was certainly not a public hearing. And I note in looking at your agenda that evening, you had a public hearing on other items, and this was under new business. So my understanding is new business is generally considered by commissions for future action and not present action. And then finally, the next day, a notice was apparently published in the Republican American, where it said, approved an interpretation request that a solar panel project that is 1 megawatt or lower in size is to be considered as transmitting power, such as transmission and communication towers, as categorized in section 23, permitted uses in the Naugatuck zoning regulations. And yet it's not until this kind of project lands next door to one of your residents that anyone really understood what happened. And once again, anyone going to the counter couldn't look at a file. There was no plans, no sample text. And based upon the minutes, I think the ruling was kind of perhaps a bit unsupported. But so I would urge the commission not to rely on this interpretation. And I would submit that you are not bound by it. And I understand that you're a zoning commission and lawyers cite cases, and it's not within the jurisdiction, and it's not fair to expect this commission to interpret case law. But I would suggest that if you have any doubt, that you consult with your town attorney as to whether this commission, by interpretation, can alter the plain language of your zoning regulations. And so I urge the commission to deny this application. And once again, I cannot emphasize enough that I respect the work that you and all zoning commissions do. I understand that you're trying to do the right thing in your town. I understand that you are trying to consider alternative energy options, but it is inconceivable to me that this commission knowingly sort of opened the gate for basically a commercial industrial use in this zone next door to my client's properties and so many other residential properties, and open the door for this to occur indeed on any property. And I also would adopt the comments by so many of your residents as to A, that there are so many locations in your town where this would be a great use, but the impacts on environmental concerns, on character, and as we've shown on property values, are really ones that this commission should listen to in denying this application. I thank you for your generous patience. I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this point, and thanks for hearing me.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? No way.
Mr. Chairman, may I address the commission?
Yes.
So for the record, Ned Fitzpatrick, Commission Counsel. With regard to the process, my suggestion is that and I'll leave it up to the commission, the chair and the members. Based on the report by Mr. Stewart, which I believe is dated today. Is that right? Is that December 15th? Based on the report of Mr. Stewart, my suggestion is that the commission should extend the public hearing to allow the applicant an opportunity to respond to Mr. Stewart's comment. And that also allows the neighbors and the members of the public an opportunity to hear those responses and to air their replies to those responses. I think that's the practice of this commission for the last several decades, and that's the way it's been done. And I think that's a fair opportunity for everyone to get their positions on the record and to alert the commissioners as to what their positions are. So, Mr. Chairman, that's what I suggest as a matter of process. I recommend that you do that. There are other comments that were made that affect interpretation. My recommendation to that is when you get into deliberations, I'll address all those issues. I have some questions for staff, which I'll address with staff.
May I just respond briefly, Mr. Chairman? If I may, I think that Attorney Fitzpatrick's comments are well taken, and I think that he presents I think it's sensible to do what he has recommended to the commission. I would ask, however, that the applicant's response be limited to the items that were raised by Mr. Stewart in his letter, and that we don't essentially go back to a new and sort of basically a new application where we begin again and information, so that we can avoid going circular at a certain point. The rules of this commission, as Attorney Fitzpatrick knows, are governed by the rules of fundamental fairness and natural justice. And I would suggest that everyone's had a full and fair opportunity. I think it's correct that today the town engineer published this letter and that the applicant is at a disadvantage. But I would suggest that the response by the applicant be limited to the materials that the town engineer has requested, so that we can kind of close the scope of this a little bit and bring this hearing to a close and not make the area of inquiry wider at this point.
All right, we'll take it
Mr. Chairman, one brief response to that. It has never been the practice of this commission for as long as I've been around, which exceeds Mr. Green's years of practice, that this commission would preclude an applicant from making changes to an application that it is deemed by suggestion of applicants, by suggestion of opponents or members of the public at any time during the public hearing process, for the avowed purpose that this commission has seen time and time again, that applications get better. As the public process continues and there's full and fair opportunity for people to discuss their concerns about applications get better. They just improve. We've seen this throughout our history. So this commission has never restricted an applicant to the limitations that that council is requesting. And I suggest that this would be not a good road for the commission to travel down at this point. I think let the applicant respond. In this case, it looks like there may be for example, there may be based on Mr. Stewart's comments that I see here, that the pool may be happen, or the pond may happen to be redesigned. If that's true, that may change other items in a site plan. So I don't think it would be fair to restrict the applicant to a certain narrow expression of responses based on what the opposition or the opponents are requesting here. I think we should let it all, well, Mr. Chairman, let it all hang out, if you know what I mean.
So if
Just let
that's the
Let
case,
it all play out. Let it all play out on the public record. Let it all be fair. Let it all be full. And let there be examination. Let there be a critical analysis. And let's get it on. Let's just move on with it. But let's let it all take its course. That would be my recommendation.
if that's the case, Mr. Chairman, can the commission at least set a date by which the applicant must submit the materials to allow the public, including my clients, a full and fair opportunity to respond in advance of the hearing?
Reasonable. I suggest you ask the applicant what would be appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
Fine, that's fine.
How much time does the applicant need to respond to Mr. Stewart's comments and any comments the applicant has heard this evening? And how much time then would Attorney Green's and his client need to respond to them? It's reasonable.
You guys ready for me now?
You bet.
My name
Nothing
is-
further for me, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, guys.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, my name is Chris Gagnon. I'm a professional engineer here in Connecticut. I work for BL Companies, 355 Research Parkway in Meriden, Connecticut. I guess I'm going to respond to that last question. There was a whole lot of discussion going on. That's a lot to unpack, but I'm going to keep this response very simple. I have coordinated with the town engineer and the town staff. I did receive the town engineer's comments. I am happy to provide revised plans related to those comments if that is the commission's desire. And I will submit the plans to the town engineer with plenty of time for him to review and respond prior to the next hearing. I believe that is the most appropriate course of action. I don't want to put anything on Mr. Stewart's plate that would put him under the gun time-wise, so I will respond to his comments with ample time for him to review prior to the next hearing. So that would be how I would respond to that statement.
Well, we'd also want to make sure that the council, and certainly council and his engineer, has an opportunity, ample opportunity for them to review your comments along with Mr. Stewart's sort of response to your comments, I suppose. So isn't that the whole idea here? Are we going to be able to structure that in a time frame that would work? I mean, for example, Mr. Gagnon, can you respond within 2 weeks, and then have maybe Mr. Stewart respond in a week, and make sure that those documents are somehow made available through staff to Attorney Green? I suppose that would be a appropriate way, and that Attorney Green would perhaps send comments back 3-4 days before the meeting. I don't know. Is that something that makes sense to everybody?
So the governor's emergency orders originally required that applicants file not less than 7 days before the hearing. And I think
Right.
the public had to file at least 24 hours before the hearing. I mean,
Right.
we're happy to do it more quickly than that, but
Yeah, whatever you think works. Look, you guys are been in this game a long time. If the lawyers and the attorney, the engineers can work it out amongst themselves, it's appropriate. Work it out, gentlemen.
sure.
That's what I suggest to you.
That's no
I
problem.
have every desire to wrap up this entire process, not that I don't enjoy coming and visiting you guys every month or so, but I have every desire to wrap up this process as quickly as possible. And if responding to Mr. Stewart's comments in a timely manner will allow everybody to review them, I will do that. I'm not going to put a date on it at this hearing right now because I got the comments today, since they're dated today. But I will commit to the intent of what Attorney Fitzpatrick has just discussed.
Mr. Chair, may I ask the staff where we are on the timeframes, statutory timeframes?
This meeting, we've used 22 days of extensions. So that
Okay,
means
so we have
40.
43. Okay.
Next mid-January, which we'll probably use, can't remember, if it's the 16th of January, but we'll use approximately another 30 days at that point.
It is actually the 19th.
Well, it's the 19th, so that's about 34 days. So we have 43 days. If we
Okay.
have anything at the next meeting of January 19th, we would only have a few days after that we would have to close the hearing after that. So
All right, well, we could use that as a sort of, worst case scenario. If we had that, we've had special meetings in the past where we've had to do things. If we had it, we'd like not to have two meetings, especially in January with weather concerns. But if we had to, we could. But if we can get the public hearing at least closed next month, I think that would really help everybody.
yeah, in essence, we have till about January 23rd, I would guess, or 24th, somewhere in there, to get the public, for the public hearing to close by the statutes. Which our next meeting is January 19th. I would guess I would ask that we ask the applicant to try and get stuff to us. You've got to respond to what you're gonna say. And for us to be able to get it up publicly, I mean, we do post everything on the internet as soon as we get it. We're trying to make everybody happy. No one's willing to give a date, so I would suggest that we want an answer or the comments back from Mr. Gagnon by probably January 10th. And would that give you ample time for a couple of days? Or I'm not sure the 10th is what day of the week it is. Let me look to see.
Now we gotta see you on a
It's a
Sunday
Monday.
too, is that what?
Oh, that's a Monday.
No,
Okay.
I will get the responses back before, I will get them back next week, so it's done before.
So why don't we put a number on that? Why don't we just say by Christmas, you'll have the responses, or by the 20th, or can you have them done by the 24th? And then I'd like to get them out.
The 23rd, you'll have a revised set of plans.
All right. And then Jim, are you here that week, Jim Stewart?
Mr. Scrooge.
We're not here. Friday, we're not here.
All right, so.
Yeah.
23rd is
Following
Thursday.
week.
Yeah,
And then get it-
so listen, everybody understands, we're not here on December 24th, we're not here on December 26th. So,
That's why I asked the question. I knew you were out a few days. So we're looking at maybe Jim Stewart doing a review and responding by what, the first week in January, James?
yes, yep,
All right, so then that report and that response can be provided to the applicant, the neighbor and his counsel. Could we arrange to have that done?
yeah, and Mr. Green would have to send me an email, and then I could email any documents directly to him if he'd like.
I'm happy to
Attorney
do that.
Green, do you hear that? Good.
Good.
Oh, I'm
So-
gonna suggest this, Mr. Gagnon, if you can provide your updated to me by Tuesday, December 28th, that should give an ample time for Mr. Stewart to be able to see it. At that point, make his opinions probably first week of January, which give plenty of time, almost 18, 19 days probably, for me to provide that information to Mr. Green as soon as Mr. Stewart was to give it to me.
And then the commission as well.
The commission, I will provide it to you, of course, right away. anything I'm emailing out, I'll CC you on that, so that you're seeing the same. From Mr. Stewart.
Great.
Everybody good with that?
And
All right.
what about,
Sounds like a plan.
and Mr. Gagnon's reply, we'll get to them also, correct? Not just Jim's review.
Yes, yes.
Everything.
Yeah.
Mr. Gagnon
Yes.
said I will send it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's-
Mr. Stewart,
yeah.
I will send to you also.
And if there's another reply, after Mr. Stewart replies, if Mr. Gagnon replies to that, let's get the information out if we can to Attorney Green and to, I assume Attorney Green, you communicate that to your engineer. Is that how that would go?
Yeah, so can we have everything by like January 7th or January 10th or something?
Why not? So Mr. Stewart's agreed for January 10th.
I'm
Or
on, I'm
January.
on vacation starting I believe, the 14th, so I'm gonna have everything done by that date.
Yep, but what's the day of the hearing is what, the 19th?
Yeah, that's.
Does that
too
give you
tight.
enough time, counsel?
No.
I
that's-
would,
The week of the 3rd, if I get it before January, I'll get it done the first week in January.
So
That's
Mr.
great.
Gagnon told us December 28th. You'll have it.
Thank you.
You'll have it.
counsel, that works for you.
Yeah, that's fine. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Very well.
Perfect set of plans, so it'll be very easy for you.
And, happy holidays to one and all.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir.
So we
So we'll continue the
continue
hearing.
the hearing till January 19th.
We're gonna continue the hearing till January 9th at 6:05.
Correct.
So Jim will be next meeting?
I don't believe so, but I'll have a review for you, and you're just listening to final comments and closing the public hearing, so I'll be here for the one after that for discussion.
All right. Thank you.
You're not going.
Better go.
Anyway,
All right. Anybody want to take a break or you guys good?
I'm good.
All right, so let's keep on going.
oh, wait a minute.
You're good with me?
Yeah, we're good.
All right. I will,
Everybody understands the dates, all that stuff? Okay, good.
We continued the hearing to,
Jim, do you want to talk about anything that you prepared to or like
Well,
the
no, the
changes?
changes
or
in the-
you just
the new
gonna
map.
wait till-
We just got these, so I don't know what the changes are.
It's totally up to you guys. I can give a 10,000-foot view review. I can respond to Mr. Stewart's, in my opinion, minor comments. But there were no fundamental changes to the design of the ponds in the same place. We incorporated some information from the geotech. We incorporated some of the comments from Mr. Trinkus, and with that, we provided a revised plan that Mr. Stewart has reviewed. He had I would classify it as a very short list of comments, which I can address in the next week or so. But
So basically, the changes that are in this are the ones that you've already addressed in the letter.
he's already reviewed.
I've reviewed that. They haven't made the changes that I'm requesting in my letter.
Based on.
Yes, based on that,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
so I think it will be gone over at the next one.
Okay. All right, everybody.
All right, thanks.
I guess happy holidays,
Merry
because I won't
Christmas.
see you till the new year, but Mr. Stewart and I will get him what he needs as soon as possible, not into his vacation, and thank you very much all for your patience and time today. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Thank
Thanks, everybody. All right.
Thank you.
And so we're gonna continue the public hearing. We're gonna go now to the livestock, the 6:10 public hearing to revise the livestock poultry regulations and requirements of the dog regulations, applicant Borough of Naugatuck.
So what we did get since the last meeting, one letter. And if you'd like, I'll read that in now. That letter for that one. And it starts, hello, my name is Cassandra Mas. I live on Heritage Drive here in Naugatuck. Would like to express my support for amending the livestock ordinance to allow poultry fowl within the town limits and on small properties. It was too many generations ago that our families were encouraged to grow our own food in order to support the troops fighting overseas. You can go Google Victory Gardens on this topic. In much of the literature and advertisements dispersed at the time, home food planning included egg-laying hens, recommended 2 hens per person. Even pre-pandemic, the sustainability movement has made many people in the younger generations aware of these campaigns. And a second generation of gardeners began starting vegetables at home, growing microgreens in windowsills and building coops for small flocks of not only chickens, but quail and pheasants. During the pandemic, even more people have joined the homesteading, sustainability, and/or prepping communities, both online and in person. These communities are no longer just PETA, vegans, country folks, and doomsday prophets. They are the families who support the plastic bag bans, those who use EBT to purchase seeds because their diet isn't in line with what is affordable from the grocery store, and anyone who was affected by the great toilet paper shortage of 2020, who decided it's probably unwise to have your basic needs hang on the whim of a corporate just-in-time logistics and operations practice worldwide. Since we purchased our home in 2015, I've been able to make violet jelly each spring because I don't spray my lawn with pesticides. I frequent the bridle trail to forage mushrooms and invasive edibles, of which we have many. I've been a member of the Sunset Farms CSA, as well as the Gazy and Clover Nook. I have annual and perennial gardens to supplement my food supply and give native bees a place to live. I'd really love to add a small greenhouse and four quail to our space, but do so legally on on a quarter to a third of an acre. These things are possible and even sustainable to do with forethought and planning, just like anything else in life. There are many sources and examples of people who farm in small places, so I won't supply to you too many, but here's a few. And then there's some website listing. You have been provided with the letter. I haven't even mentioned the health and educational benefits of having your own food supply, which for many people include eggs and fowl. People are more active, eat healthier food, make healthier choices, and become more connected to their food source when it's at home. Children learn where their food comes from and value life skills from the additional responsibilities of having your own food to care for. This is especially important when 40% of American 6-year-olds think that hot dogs are vegetables. And they list the source. I again ask to please amend the current livestock ordinance to allow poultry fowl in Naugatuck. Please feel free to contact me with any questions, concerns, or discussion. Best regards, Cassandra Mas, MSPMP. I won't read her number, and then her email is there. And there is one person, I believe, that is here. I'm not sure if she'd like to make a comment or not. You'd be welcome to come up here. And you would have to just state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Carrie O'Connell. I live at 23 Comfort Road here in Naugatuck. Thank you so much. I'm sorry that I crashed your meeting. I didn't realize that it was a Zoom meeting. Like Cassandra, who wrote the letter, those of us in town who value sustainability were disappointed after we bought our houses to realize that you couldn't have a small flock here. It's such a rural, beautiful, small town. It's surrounded by right to farm towns. So much of our town flows into towns like Oxford and Bethany and Beacon Falls, and yet there's this cutoff where they're able to live a lifestyle that we're not able to live. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed, I know I've almost hit a few chickens in town. A lot of people already have chickens and it works with our town. It feels natural with our town. And yet so many of my neighbors are hiding chickens, and it's unnecessary because we do have the landscape and the sense of a small town that really it's missing, that we can't have this element for sustainability and for really enriching our town. And also just because we border so many beautiful towns and we do have that difference of lifestyle where they're able to be sustainable and we're not just a few streets away. I feel that it's really detracts from sort of I think a lot of us in town we always feel like we're this close to being that perfect small town, and yet we kind of miss the mark a little bit compared to our neighbors. And I feel like this is a way for people who are shopping for houses. I know in my demographic, I'm in my 30s with a young family. Everybody's talking about homesteading, sustainability. They want a little flock. It's why people, friends of mine are coming in from more crowded towns to this area because they're seeking that. And I think that it's just really important for building up sort of the personality and the character of Naugatuck. Let us have just this small thing that really, I mean, the instance of the solar farm, that's a very complicated issue that has so many factors to think of. This is a very simple decision because it's just letting New Englanders do what New Englanders have done for centuries. And it just feels so natural with our town that it's really disappointing to live here and not be able to do that when so many of us do have yards that would allow for it if it weren't for the rule. And also just the rule is very restricted. From what I understand, you can't even have a rabbit in your yard with the current ordinance. And it just feels very punitive and restrictive and not really in keeping with where our town wants to go and where the people who are purchasing here because of all the positive attributes are really wanting to go with the town. And my last point is just that there's a little bit of, we're a town with a Tractor Supply. They just opened, they have that beautiful building. They sell chickens, they sell chicks, they sell coops, they sell feed. And yet none of us in our town can actually have those things. So it's a little bit of a mixed message and missed opportunity because, I know the town is trying to be more pro-business. And I just feel like bringing that business in to sort of even help us to herald in some responsible, safe chicken keeping would be a great opportunity. And the last thing we want is for that building to be empty. So it would just be a great opportunity for the people, the town, a business that's in our town to be supported. I feel like everybody wins, and it's just very in keeping with where I think the future of the town is going in terms of what people who are newly purchasing houses are really looking for and what will keep us here, to be honest. So I thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Any questions? Well,
We
yes.
have
if
one
there's
more.
anybody else.
We have
No, I mean,
somebody.
for-
Oh,
Okay. Open it up.
you're already on fire.
Good evening, guys. How are you? Some of you guys know me, some of you don't. My name is Herman Sanchez. I live at 88 Moonlight Circle. And I'm also coming in support of the poultry ordinance that you're trying to do. I've been in town since 2018, moved in from Waterbury, originally from Westchester in New York. And like the lady said, one of the things that attracted me and my family into this town was that this is nearly, for all intents and purposes, almost a perfect little town. You have your yes, you have your no's. It happens everywhere. But this particular one it really bothered me because when I'm looking at it I'm a Dominican, and we come from a country where most of us grow some sort of vegetables, animals, cows, chickens, whatever. And one of the things about this is not only about sustainability, but what you're actually teaching other generations when you have a chicken in your house, the same way you have a dog, you have a cat. You're teaching responsibility and you're teaching sustainability. At the same time, there are people, I have a lot of customers in my company who up northern part of the state that have a lot of chickens. They have rabbits, chickens, horses, etc. And one of the things that they do is they moved away from the areas that do not allow them to have this because they felt that they were being penalized. And that's the way that I see the current ordinance. So if you can't afford to have more than 3 acres, you can't have a chicken. This is America. I don't think in America you can't tell somebody just because you can't afford to have something this big, you can't have this. I understand a lot of the people being apprehensive about having a rooster going up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You don't have a rooster in this planet, it's only a hen. Hens don't make that much noise, Rabbits don't make any noise. And as long as people are responsible of what they do, and they have the property and their neighbors are okay with it, there shouldn't really be any reason why you can't have one chicken if that's the case. And I mean, it really makes no sense to me why we don't have it. Like the lady said, I moved into town and the first thing I wanted to do was do something in my yard. And the next thing you know, my neighbor tells me, oh, you can't do it because the property is not big enough. And it didn't make any sense to me, but anyhow, it's been a long night. I don't want to take much more of your time, but like, again, I'm here in support of the new ordinance, and hopefully you guys come to your senses, let it happen, because at the end of the day, if you see the groups on Facebook and you talk to people on Church Street and on the supermarkets, Walmart, anywhere, everybody wants it. We have a business in town, Tractor Supply that sells it. They sell the chicken coops, everything that you need, but yet we can't buy it to put in our own house, in our own homes. It makes no sense. Gentlemen, have a good evening, happy holidays, and thank you for all you do, and good luck with the whole solar panel thing. That looks like fun.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
One question, Fran, is that Fran Gambowski? Fran?
What happened, excuse me?
No, I was just asking if one of the people online was Fran, our liaison. Okay, thank you.
All right, so what?
So there doesn't appear to be anybody else who's gonna comment on this. Right?
No, I have nobody else.
So what I did provide to you based upon what we've talked about in the past, I took a swig at the regulation myself based upon what Lori had written previously. And we came with the idea of creating this section 25A, which is the accessory use regulation for backyard poultry. We kept the purpose as the same. This, you guys all have this, or I kept the purpose as basically being the same. And I tried to take a look at it as how could we be inclusive and yet still somewhat be able to limit what the issues are out there that we hear the most from people, and have enforcement ability just beyond our office. Okay, because at 3 acres of land, it was the enforcement was really on us. That was it. And we're not experts. I'm not an expert in whether a chicken's being treated wrong on property with the coop, the way it's being taken care of, the health part about it, all that. But when there were issues in the past, the answer from certain departments was, gotta have 3 acres, can't have it. And I think we have to get a little bit beyond that, allow experts to be involved also. So with the standards, I don't think, I think we kept it the same, whereas like number 1, it's basically referring to at least 20 feet from the side and rear property boundary lines. And that they be suitably contained on the premises at all times. Free range backyard poultry is prohibited at all times. Meaning that the thought of them just walking, and that's, again, that's one of the complaints we have from neighbors, is that, hey, I just threw this grass seed down and my neighbor's chickens are over here eating it. You know, and the answer was always, I don't want to get rid of the chickens, just keep in their yard. So I think that addresses that. Structure built for the care of the occupants inside the enclosure, which I guess are referring to chickens or rabbits, that's the occupants, must be located inside the fenced-in area of the enclosure, must be used. Or no, I was saying if they had a hen house or something like that, it's got to be included inside. Zoning permit shall not be required for the purpose of the hen house type structure. In my opinion, I don't think, you know, they're not large structures, some of these hen houses. Some might be the size of a shed. Maybe we'd have to look at that and say, what else are you doing? This is just, but if you're doing it just for 5 chickens, it shouldn't be a Taj Mahal. It shouldn't be 10 by 20. You know, if you're making parts of it as a shed also, well, that's a different case, but it's just meant solely for the livability of the chickens. I think we can limit it to that part for that.
As far as footing for that goes, is there going to be any anything written in there about the actual footing, whether or not, you know, it has to stay above ground, anything like that, or do we care?
I guess that, guys, would be up to you. We don't have that right now for sheds. only when it's over 200 square feet, and that's based upon state building codes. On that. Such buildings shall be constructed and all food products kept so as to prevent offensive odors and the presence of pests and predators. Gotta maintain it. Gotta maintain the structure. It shouldn't have holes. It shouldn't have areas for animals to get in. Again, that could be something that we're working with the health department on those type of things where people are claiming their issues there. No backyard poultry may be kept inside any structure used for residential purposes. Trust me, it happens. I told you one time I went to a house, had to be over 100 pigeons inside the house in the basement. And I'm thinking now there might be people who are keeping chickens in their house because, like our guest over there said, people are hiding them.
Well, in the public hearing, the person said chicken was a pet.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up at the last meeting, there was concern about overreach into a person's home. What type of authority we would have for what's going on inside?
Yeah.
That would be difficult, but I think for the health department, they would have a more easier avenue to be able to get in, fixing on a health issue, on something like that. Structures for keeping backyard poultry rabbits should not be permitted directly over the land containing an on-site sewage disposal system. That was something we kept from before. Proper drainage shall be provided to avoid collection of water. Water shall be diverted from backyard poultry rabbit areas. And again, we kept this from before. That was there. We talked about the keeping of backyard poultry rabbits shall be conducted in a manner consistent with and in compliance with the Naugatuck Valley Health District. And again, if there are issues in regard to the health situation that's there, the health district, that's why we have them. They should be able to go in there now, not be able to say, well, you don't have 3 acres of land. The storage and management of waste. Again, I think we got Lori from what it was before. As amended
shall not
in-
exceed 1 cubic yard.
Yeah, and that was based on Mr. Stewart, who has chickens, said 1 cubic yard is a lot. You know, and again, some of the people do use the chicken manure for their gardens, and we're not talking about that. That would be separate in my opinion, but you know, keeping it specific to that, but then you must use it for what you're using in your garden and whatnot. Where I spent the most time on was on my second page, and I tried to limit this as little as possible because the more wording you make, the less people read, in my opinion. So I tried to simplify it. So with lot size and number of backyard poultry or rabbits for residential zone, a single family residential property must be at least 1/2, I put /0.5 an acre, or 21,780 square feet in size, and will be allowed as a right to have up to 5 hens or rabbits on the property at one time. I chose those numbers specific to 21,780. Lori said, why don't you just make it 20? I said, because it doesn't match with 1/2 acre. 21,780 is 1/2 acre exactly. And our property cards list things by 0.5 or you know, so I tried to make it as simple as possible. It's on your property card. You look it up, you know, you don't have to go and do your own calculations. I put everything there for us to even see. But in my opinion, I think 1/2 acre is a good enough size. I'll leave that up to you. For each 1/4 acre or 0.25 of an acre or 10,890 square feet of land, which measures out to 1/4 of an acre, of a single family residential property will be allowed as a right 3 additional hens or rabbits on the property at one time. So if you have an acre of land, simple to multiply out. For every 1/4 acre, you get 3 more. You have an acre, you got 6 more. If you have an acre and a half, then for each 1/2 acre or each 1/4 acre, you're going to get your additional added on.
Can I bring up something? So it doesn't say additional. Reading this way, it shows that you can have a 1/4 acre and have 3 chickens.
That's what, yeah. That's what it sounds like.
Okay, so we could rechange the wording.
So the smallest.
For what if we put for any property over the size of 1/2 acre? The following, you know, because we were trying to keep it as simple to, I don't know how to word it, to keep it that, you have to have at least a half an acre.
Just say in excess, a half acre or more. That's all you say.
Okay, so for properties in excess of
1/2 acre. Mhm, or one.
for properties in excess
So
or
half an acre, get 3.
Or more.
the first one defined the half acre. Now you have to have 0.75 for properties for the size for each, and that's why I put for each quarter acre, you get 3. So for
For
each
each
quarter
additional-
acre of land above a half
Additional
acre,
quarter, for each additional quarter acre.
above a half acre.
Above half an acre,
Okay,
an additional 3.
for each quarter acre, or 10,000 above 1/2 acre of land, a single family resident will be allowed 3. All right.
That sounds right.
Okay, so that means for every quarter acre additional you have, you get the following additional. So if you had 2.5 acres of land, you would just multiply the math out. At no time are roosters allowed or permitted on a property that is not designated as a farm, the Nordic land use regulations. We have that in the regulations already. It will be the responsibility of the tenant of a property to relocate any roosters from a property that does not meet the Nordic land use regulations. And then farms as designated Nordic land shall have no limit on the number of poultry and or rabbits that may be kept on a property. That's where it is currently at.
Repeat that, I'm sorry, I missed that last sentence.
Farms as designated in the land use regulations shall have no limit on the number of poultry and or rabbits that may be kept on a property. And we have that now.
So, zoning enforcement would still be responsible for the rooster issues if anybody complains about this?
Yes. Because roosters are not necessarily, in my opinion, an issue with health. They're a nuisance. And I would state that on that, we're not allowed to have roosters. So that's what we do.
So what do people do with the roosters that they end up with?
And if that's the chicken soup he was
At
talking
the
about.
Okay. And we have told people, that's what the complaint is generally about.
So we'll have roosters running all over town.
Yeah, well, there's one guy, he let rabbits go, he had rabbits, he just let them go in the woods.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they don't last too long.
Yeah. But there was a guy up off Prospect Street. When I saw the rabbits, they had to be 30-pound rabbits. They were huge. I mean, they were this big. And I said, that's not a rabbit, it's a dog. And I was amazed how big they were. Permitting these structures and enclosures shall not require a zoning permit, but all owners of backyard poultry yards shall submit a written statement to the zoning enforcement officer certifying compliance to these regulations. It's gonna be difficult to get that, but the fact is that if a complaint comes in, you say, okay, we need you to get a zoning compliance that you understand this now. And we do have a zoning compliance form. We generally fill it out in our office. It's a $25 fee. Just to let you know on that.
So can we go back to number 4, no backyard poultry may be kept inside? And AJ brought up the fact, can we regulate inside a house? So
Can we regulate it? Yes.
I'm
We
asking,
Yeah,
Ned,
but can't access.
what did Ned have to say?
You can regulate it. The question is enforcement. You can absolutely regulate it, but you're not going to be able to get inside a house to enforce it. So unless the health department finds an imminent danger to health and safety and welfare of something or somebody.
But that's no different in any zoning that's at a house. You
Right.
have to get a search warrant or be invited in.
Right.
If it's not obvious, they have chickens inside, who really cares? One chicken.
So
inside,
should it be
she's
kept,
best friend.
something like that be kept in there?
I think it should be kept in there because it is potentially enforceable. And we're stating that we don't want you to have them in your house.
Yeah, no, I think you should keep it in your regulations. Just be aware that the difficulty is the enforcement. That's where you're gonna have trouble.
Be the big force that we're gonna have to deal with. Because it's not gonna be easy to get inside.
Right.
But it should be there.
Great.
And that's no different than hoarding. A zoning
Yeah.
officer has the least ability to get inside a house for hoarding. It's the fire marshals and health department who really get enforcement.
And also gives individuals who may have grievances a path to resolution as well.
Yeah.
So if it's a side-by-side family dwelling, one neighbor is having issues with smells or anything else coming through the wall, then they would now have the ability to.
Well, it wouldn't be in a multi.
Having it in there, at least you're covered.
Right.
We have no control, to your point, that there could
We
be
said
somebody. in the
single family
apartment.
residence.
Why, but you have multis that have an acre of land.
We discussed this before, that a single family residence,
I thought it was,
that's in there from prior.
so you're saying I can't have a chicken in my house and I have 3/4 of an acre?
No.
That doesn't seem right.
For multis.
Well,
I
in
have a
my
multi
opinion,
in a-
you
in
have
a
two families
residential
on
zone,
3/4 of an
R15.
acre, split it in half, you're at
So if
375.
my upstairs is empty, I can't have chickens.
You're also a non-conforming,
That's the same way with me. I got an acre and a quarter. I can't have chickens either.
are you multifamily?
Family, yeah. That's fine.
That have.
What happened to him?
He fell off his chair.
Did he
He's
really?
Okay.
He looks like he's at dinner.
Yeah. We're worried about you, Ned.
I'm here. Drop the phone. I think the raucous laughter knocked the phone out of my hand.
4 acres, so they can't have a chicken.
I thought it was, we have some of the old places that have a store on the bottom in a residential zone with a residential above. So no commercial. No commercial, I thought that's what we were saying. You know what I mean? Like you have the little neighborhood stores, Cindy's Market.
Yeah.
Residential above, I could see none there, but what about?
Well, did we put that, I'm trying to see where it's in here, we're referring it to,
In what we had.
we are referring to single family residential properties.
We were just saying for a residential zone only.
I thought we had it before in the other regular. We had rewritten.
There's a point where you want to stop.
It
You
was-
don't want condos to start having chickens. They got big lots. so-
But it also.
You don't want.
The other
Family
residents.
homes to do it.
Yeah, but condos wouldn't, they would have to go before their association. We wouldn't have to be doing, they wouldn't allow it.
Well,
I would just like to bring us back to when and how and the process of why we started this and where we've been going. Initially, when it came up, it was brought up by Burgess Vitale that had 24 or so people talk to him about chickens and wanting chickens. I look forward to the public hearing so that we could hear what's going on out there, who wants chickens, what it's like, what we should know about it. But I think what we're doing more is basing a regulation on what we're thinking. We've heard very little from the public about even wanting chickens, and actually stronger opinions, strenuous objections of having chickens. So my concern is that we're writing regulation with very little input from the public.
I think today's person who came in made a good presentation about the people coming to Naugatuck, the new generation of people coming in.
But we can't forget the people that have lived next to or been aware of people with chickens that have strong objections. And again, for the people that want chickens, we're hearing very little. And we've had this open for several months now. So to keep changing it to make it what we think, I'm not sure.
I think it's
That's what we
based on
should
what
do.
we get, all summer long, we get complaints about chickens and it's kind of like the pools in the summer, you know, everybody wants a pool and then they have to get a variance, so we're looking to change the regulations to kind of fit. You know what I mean, like the pools. we
To
should
get what
probably
everybody's
revisit.
doing out there that they're not supposed to be doing based on our regulations.
I think
I'm
some
not-
older regulations, I don't know, but I understand, I just wanted to say that, yes, it said mixed use before, I had it on any residential property excluding mixed use in a residential zone. So like, you couldn't have a store or a restaurant with an apartment above, but you could have it with a multifamily in a residential zone with the right square footage. Was the old regulation, but
You get a lot of complaints in areas that are half an acre, or is it mostly small lots that people?
it's basically all over, and we get
Yeah.
people calling when they first come to town wanting to know, and what you have to have for chickens, and we tell them 3 acres. So those don't even get them. They might have a decent sized lot. I'm not sure how big your lot is.
As the regulation is now, probably 95% of the people that have chickens are not in compliance.
Yeah, I think we need to make a change. We need to come to a conclusion tonight on what we want to do and just do it and move on. And then address or add or add to it as we go. I mean, Neil, what?
You're right.
You know.
You're right.
You know,
I'm in agreement.
you know. I mean,
How come animal control doesn't step in with his chickens and crossing the road?
Because you need 3 acres of land to have it.
My animal control, if chickens are wandering around, wouldn't they pick them up?
No,
No.
I don't think they do. It all comes down to where they
Throw it back with a dog.
And the chicken.
So I guess what I would say there then is all we need to do is take out the word single. If you wanted to have it in a multifamily case,
Well, we could
you would
go,
have to, we would
What
take
would
out
the old thing
a
say?
residential property must be at least half acre of land.
excluding,
And that takes out any commercial mixed use property.
Well, you should say residentially zoned. I mean, we really should look at that language specifically if you're thinking in the terms to make sure that it's not a residential used property. You're talking about a residential zoned property?
in the very
Yes,
first.
right here.
No, so on our first paragraph, it says, the intent of this regulation is to allow for the keeping of backyard poultry, blah, blah, blah. As a non-commercial accessory use to a residential use in any residential zone.
Okay,
Backyard poultry and or rabbits are not allowed on a mixed-use property, which we could add in a residential zone, because some residential zones do have mixed use still.
right. Yes, they do. Mhm. Mhm.
So you're saying
On the first
on the
page,
first page where it says backyard poultry and or rabbits are not allowed on a mixed use property in a residential zone.
correct. And then we just take off the back lot sizes for a residential zone.
And we just take out,
For residential zone only, yeah, you say it right there, residential zone, you're not saying, oh, take out the. single. Just say,
I'm sorry, Laura,
number one, where you say
Right.
single family residential property. You can
right,
just
we're
say,
saying a residential property must be at least,
Yeah.
take out single family.
I'm not for doing multis. I think then you're subjecting all the levels on the multifamily.
Can we
to
put in
chickens,
a
and they may
regulation?
not want that.
Right.
They have to
Right, you-
move.
Yeah, you could do a single family home, in a residential zone. It's a single family residential zone. Yeah, sure.
That's what I just did.
But what I'm saying, so then I couldn't have a chicken, I have a 2-family house with 3/4
No.
of it.
No chicken for you.
Well, I got a 2-family house with a barn, and I can't have a chicken.
I have a barn
Well,
too.
there you go.
4
I
acres.
think that should be a special.
Well, you make an exception. Well, you make an exception.
I got a 3 acre.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's a perfect example where if you have a barn, why wouldn't you be allowed chickens? I mean, there you go.
Yeah, but I don't, but I have a barn.
Is there
out
any way
back.
to, is there any way to put in some type of wording that would state that the family
Residential.
situation, that you have to have the approval of other families to be able to have.
How do you make an exact?
Well,
I'm
here's, we could also say, if it's a two-family house, you divide the property size by 2. And so in your case, Lori, if you have easy, say if you have 0.8 of an acre and you have a two-family, so each family basically is 0.4, you fall under. But if you were at 1 acre, you could.
You fall under what?
Again, I just, can we bring it back to the fact that we had 3 acres and now we're moving to anything except mixed use? I mean, and we're swinging the pendulum all the way the other side. And I'm not sure that we should do that. I'm not in favor.
Yes. So Eileen, your point is that especially in the multifamily reign, that it's not fair to one, if there's two tenants and one tenant has chickens and poultry and the other doesn't like them. It's really infringing on the freedoms of the people next door, right? I mean, that's kind of the way I see what you're arguing there, right?
Kids, to play in the yard and they're not your
Yes.
kids.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And that was one of the, I think one of the earlier public hearings, we heard similar comments from 1 or 2 of the residents along those lines. I mean, that's a real concern. I'm not sure this is ready to be adopted, but you guys are policymakers. I'm just a lawyer, but unless you want to adopt it and see how it goes, and if you have to amend it later, you can always amend it. I mean, right now you're very restrictive. I think that's pretty clear. 3 acres, that sort of eliminates everybody. So now you have 1,000 non-conforming uses in town, which is a bad thing, right? So, should it be reduced to something that's realistic? The acreage, minimum acreage, probably. What that number should be,
New Haven regulates chickens on any lot in a residential zone.
yeah, but that's New Haven,
The city is a lot denser than us.
There aren't any large parcels in New Haven except the New Haven Country Club. There aren't any large parcels, really.
And then I feel with the multis, it should be the landlord should have the say. You got tenants in there, you're not gonna allow some people.
Yeah, but then you'll have chickens becoming comfort animals, and then the landlords can't they can't eliminate the chickens because they're comfort animals for their. I'm just saying, it's not a. When you're mixing two different families or different families with fowl, it's an issue. It's a real issue.
I think that what Ned said made the most sense. If we were to adopt the original with the slight modifications we did as a single family property, we can adopt that, keep it at the ½ acre. That way we have the coverage that we were looking for last time. We can still reconvene for amendments for the multifamily to discuss that once we get a little more information there, to Eileen's point.
Well, we can see what the outreach is to at that point.
That's exactly right. I mean, at this point, we're either going to put this to bed with no change whatsoever, which means we're still going to have thousands of people out of compliance. Or B, we pass this as the single family as written with the slight modification of the additional chickens per quarter acre. And then we can review it once everything's done. That'd be my recommendation.
Neil?
Agreed.
A lot of questions. For example, first paragraph, turkeys. I don't want turkeys around me.
They come naturally.
Turkeys,
I have a whole family of turkeys in my yard this year, like 10.
right, but in the backyard, they're very noisy, they smell.
No, they're not anybody's. They're wild turkeys that are in my
If you-
yard and they go.
If you,
I think what you're saying is the people.
yes,
Raise it.
yes.
Well, we can
I
take
mean, it
turkeys
says that turkeys and other birds of similar mature size. What does that mean? Peacock? I don't know.
Well, we could take turkeys out. I agree with you.
Right. So, I mean, that's very broad. Who knows?
Good
what-
point. It is.
So I'm not for turkeys.
We could eliminate.
And either define what other birds of similar matured size are, or take that out, in my opinion.
I agree with taking that out.
Does our friend have an opinion on the turkeys?
Oh, Herman?
Oh, hi, here. Oh,
Oh,
nice.
she awake?
So I think turkeys are maybe a little extreme if we're just getting started with poultry, to be honest. But I have a family of wild turkeys in my yard and they don't bother me. I mean, obviously, we're appealing to just people who just want sustainability. I don't think people are gonna get carried away and try to start a turkey farm. We're just talking about families who don't want to participate in factory farming, who just want a small sustainable flock. That's really who we're talking about. I mean, there's always gonna be people who are gonna go to extremes no matter what, but I think if you talk to the people around town who are really passionate about this, they want tiny flocks that they can manage. They don't want to participate in the way that factory farming affects animals. They want to be humane about it. They want to treat their chickens correctly. They want to give their chickens a beautiful life in their yard. This isn't about, trying to be extreme and open a peacock farm. It's about keeping a very small flock and treating it well, to be honest.
Thank you.
And,
The voice of
Well,
reason.
but before you go there,
yeah,
just wanted to say, if we did take out other birds of similar mature size, which I suggest we should take out, I would like to put the word ducks first, because I think it should stay and includes ducks, chickens, hens. A guinea, I'm just afraid of when you put guinea hens at the end, we should probably have the chicken hen part right near that.
But the guinea hens are
Yeah,
not
because
allowed.
a hen would
They're
refer
not
to any
allowed.
female fowl, so I want to be careful about the word hen.
But
it's
not guinea hens.
guinea hens.
Right, okay,
Capons
so,
or roosters.
all right, so are you okay with chickens, hens, ducks, and rabbits, but not, okay,
You
now
could
I
take
read
the
it that way.
hen away from
Yeah.
chicken, it's just the.
So then, talk about the standards, or what are the standards of, constructing all food products and all the things that people are supposed to do. Are we just expecting everybody knows what regulations we say, or the health district, what they say about maintaining a hen house?
Well, that, in my opinion, an animal control officer also can oversee horses, can oversee, they don't go to zoning to say, hey, that barn is too big, you're not maintaining the horse barn well. And we've seen that in other news in other towns. So in my opinion, I think this allows us the ability to go to an animal control, whether the town is prepared to do that or not. But they have these, and these are considered, in my opinion, they're considered animals. They should be the experts as to how someone is maintaining the existence of their chickens and hens and rabbits.
Right, I guess what it all ends up coming down to me is enforcement. So all of the, the people that are gonna have the hen houses, you've already had problems. I mean, because you've been called out for problems with these things, these issues with chickens. So you'll be called out, and enforcement is gonna be a big deal. And I'm not sure other people are gonna come out to enforce. I think that you're the one that's gonna be coming out to enforce everything, and
I think at the point of my enforcement, I'd be able to go to someone that is more of an expert in that field and say to them, this is the complaint we've got here in regard to, is this hen house big enough? Do you consider this being animal cruelty? I'm not gonna make a decision on that because I'm not an expert in that.
right, I guess what I'm just thinking that it's gonna be a lot more time for you to be managing this new regulation, especially when people, because we're decreasing size and allowing more people to do it. I think it's gonna fall in your lap, and I think that's going to definitely make a difference.
It may,
I'm
but
not sure
it
more
it
people
falls in
will
my
do
lap
it.
right now anyway.
I think more
Because
people
they're
would be compliant.
Yeah, they'll be more
That's-
compliant.
I mean,
The problem is they don't have 3 acres, boom, you're non-compliant.
I have no other options to assist me on enforcement right now.
Right, and that's a concern to me.
So now with this new regulation, he feels he'll have more help between Naugatuck Valley Health and
If they come out to enforce, then maybe.
Well, that's what he was saying, that he would actually notify them that, hey, you know, this particular household has just been called upon. I need your help to assess the situation on whether or not this is a true infraction or not. Now he has to go. So it does give him a larger breadth of reinforcement for enforcement by giving that, sending that to the animal control. Is that something that has to be actually documented within the?
Well, I think it would be documented as, I think at that point, if it's a cruelty issue or whether, and cruelty could be that they're not maintaining where the animals are. Is enforcement. Yeah, you know, if someone's not maintaining their dog living on the property, that's animal control's responsibility to go in there and handle that.
Ricky, we have somebody who wants to speak.
Oh, go ahead.
Herman, you're allowed, please unmute. You're allowed. Herman, yeah.
Hi, sorry. All right, listen. Now that I got more info, you guys were talking, there's a couple of things I want to address. Mrs. Branco, I believe that's her name. I'm sorry, I really can't read it on the camera.
You have to say an address again.
Mrs. Branco, oh, my address, 88 Moonlight Circle. Right next to famous Jimmy Gargan. So anyhow, I understand that from what, look, I only found out about this meeting, I want to say around 5 o'clock, that Rocky Vitale posted something on Facebook. And that's, I even canceled two of my two work orders to be able to be here tonight. And a lot of people just get the message late. But if you go, like everyone does, you go on the groups on town that has to do with Naugatuck on Facebook, where most people communicate, you know that a lot of people have different opinions on this. So it's not just a couple of people that want it. That's number one. Number two, you are very correct about the problem with the multifamily. Actually, one of my cousins has bought a property a few months ago down on Etna Street, and it's a two-family property. And they had a situation where there was something else the tenant wanted, the first floor tenant didn't want it, and now he's stuck in a limbo because, like Mr. Fitzpatrick said, the tenant upstairs, oh, this animal is now my service animal. So legally now my cousin can't do anything about that, and it's becoming an issue. It's just a dog, but he didn't want it. It's becoming an issue. And I understand where it's coming from. But when it comes to enforcement, I mean, I came up with a simple idea. People need to follow the rules. So why don't you have some system of licensing or some sort of way where you pay a minimal $50, $75 fee the first time, have someone come to your property, make sure, okay, you can have the chicken coop in this corner, you can have this, you can have that, and then have them, and every year pay a $25 fee. And that way it gives you, I'm assuming, some sort of avenue to enforce when penalize people who don't follow the rules. Because it seems to me that you guys want to go ahead with this, but you just can't figure out how to enforce when people don't follow the rules. I'm looking at the same thing when you get a dog license. If you don't get your dog neutered or you don't get rabies shots for your dogs, you don't get a dog license. I mean, that's just an idea that I'm throwing out there. But at the end of the day, we all want it. You know, I don't have any yet because I don't like to break the rules, but I want to have one next week in my house, or in the spring if I can. And I don't want to be told no because of something stupid that makes no sense. But hopefully you guys can figure it out. And sorry for taking your time again. Have a good evening.
In regard to that, we have the same scenario on sheds and fences right now. Half the people, you go out there and say, well, you need a fence permit. I do. They're going to do the same thing on chickens. They're just going to put them in. They're doing it now.
But then you can go back and charge them, right?
I go back with the fences. Yes, I'll say, well, you need to get a fence permit, or you're going to need to get a shed permit, and then we do that. So I don't think that the fact of charging somebody is going to make any difference at all, whether we're charging them for having chickens or not. But I do think it gives us the ability to listen and do some enforcement on it. And if you go on a property and say, hey, the property card says you can have this. This is the size of your property. This is what you can have. This is what you can't have. And now, if you don't do it, we will go through the zoning violation procedure. But in regard to the care, and very rare do I get much issues with the care. You're gonna get some, as Jim said, in the summer, it smells, it's this or that. Sometimes I can just do a reach out to it, and I'm not gonna automatically just sit here and say, well, you really should call the health department out. But at times I'll go to the house and say, hey, what's going on here? Does it smell that bad because you have too many? Or listen, if you don't clean up your act here, I am gonna go to the health department, and they're gonna be much tougher. Because they're gonna, that's how I see it, but.
What other questions?
I that's basically it. Enforcement is a big thing as well as the other things.
All right.
I don't disagree with charging people,
Yeah.
so that you can have them on the radar, his radar.
Yeah. Again, I think that we can add stuff as we need to. But, I'll accept the motion. First of all, do you guys have any other comments?
No other comments.
Tommy?
Thank you.
AJ?
Well, just so that we're
Comment is that I think that we should vote on a clean copy, a drafted clean copy, rather than, with all the changes that we talked about. It should be a
which can be done,
final-
we can
final
close the
copy.
hearing tonight,
Okay,
and we can present it at the next meeting to be voted on.
okay, all right.
We can do that.
Yes, yes. Staff oriented, it's a staff proposed.
So we know what all the changes are in here?
Yeah, I'm seeing that we're gonna take out the turkeys and the other birds of similar size, mature size.
Mhm.
Backyard poultry rabbits not allowed on a mixed-use property in a residential zone. We're gonna keep it with a single-family residential property for right now. And again, it's something, this is a regulation. If there's a multifamily wants to come in, they can go get a variance.
All right, so I'm going to close the public hearing to revise the livestock poultry regulations and requirements in the Naugatuck zoning regulation. Applicant for Naugatuck, it's 8/22, Wednesday, the 15th. Closed. All right, as we continue,
Yeah, you're gonna see.
so commission update on the site plan modification for One Stop Auto at 251 River Avenue.
So we did invite Tim to tonight's meeting. I did speak with his Dave Hughes, is he a surveyor?
I believe so.
A surveyor who did the site plan for us originally. We went over some stuff. I think it's best that Dave brings a plan in, which is going to show us more of exactly what's taking place on the property. As I've stressed to you in the past, I wanted to get actual more of what's on the property that's been done. And Jim Stewart and I both went to the property. We have some concerns with the amount of dirt that's been taken off compared to what we thought was going to be done. And Dave can provide that.
Is that since last meeting or before that even?
A little bit of both. I've been stressing to Tim that I had him, he didn't come last month. And it's just trying to get him to understand, so.
Because you told him no more coming off.
Has he done anything since the last day?
He did tell us that he has stopped now,
He said he stopped.
stopped taking any dirt off the property. I don't know if in his understanding of it, that he said, well, I thought you guys wanted me to get to a 2-to-1 slope. I said, yes, that's the goal of it. But the thing is you brought us the plan. And you need to do what's on your plan. And I think he was just trying to get that embankment to 2-to-1. I think he took out some areas. You're gonna hear that he's trying to get his paint booth in, that he was trying to relocate it. I said, you can't do that. You haven't stabilized. This is what you agreed to do. And I think he thinks it's more of a working document that he can just. I said, no, you've got to start doing things slowly and not just at what you want to do. And that's just the conversation that we had with him. So he has stopped. And hopefully at January 15th meeting, he'll you know, Dave Hughes will have an updated site plan to show us what's been done. And then we'll go from there. So I did issue him a letter saying, this is what we need. We want, you know, we want to get these things solidified here to tell us what you're doing exactly. Now,
Did you give him a date to have that done?
I told him if he could get it to us by the January 15th meeting. And I said that because in speaking with Dave Hughes, Dave had other stuff that he was already working on. And that he's trying, he said he wouldn't be available for tonight, Dave Hughes. And I said, okay. And that's where I told Tim, you must stop having your contractor stop doing everything. And they did. So it wasn't that they were working fast at stuff. I mean, Jim's located right across the street. They did put some drainages, like I said, across the top. I said, you know, put that on a plan. That wasn't on the original plan, but at least get that on there. Tell us what you've done with the fencing. Tell us what you've done with this. Tell us. So if we can get that stuff done, and if they're gonna present a change, then it might be, we have to do a site plan modification again.
What they've done doesn't look bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look bad. It's just originally they had proposed what, a 40-foot planted buffer at the top, a level buffer, and then slope down 2 to 1. And now they've got what, 10 feet or 15, maybe somewhere in that area.
Right,
and they've graded, I assume 2 to 1 down to get more flat parking area. It looks like it'll eventually be stable, but I think you've got to you know, have another meeting and discuss it, because again, the neighbors, I don't know, they might have been quite happy with the 40 feet, and now it's 15 feet. It may not be planted as well as they had thought, and maybe now they're looking at a parking lot when before they weren't. So, you know, I think you've got to look at it and make sure that you're happy and
Well, because they're going up against a residential zone, we do have a 40-foot buffer. You know, when it was 40 feet, there was more flat, and now that section is gone. We may want to see more landscaping done on that 40-foot area now, because it's more viewable. There was, my other concern is that our regulations state that you cannot go closer than 15 feet before you start excavation. You know, and I think, I'm like, I want to see that you're not in that 15 feet now. I said, on the plan you presented to us, that wasn't a concern because you were going to be 40 feet. And so I don't think what he's done is a bad thing, but I just wanted to see it.
That's a big piece of property, yeah? Goes way up.
Well, yeah, it goes up to the houses beyond there. And I mean, he did plant some trees like he was supposed to up top and this and that. But again, the slope starts about, I think, 15 feet off, but I'm not going to traipse up through the mud. I said, you also agreed that you would get the bank stabilized before the paint booth was going to be done. And, you know, and then one time I went there, and he's like, well, I was thinking of putting the paint booth over there. I said, you can't. That's not what you told us. You told us to be over here. Well, that doesn't work. Well, that's not my problem.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, at what point is he just not compliant to what we're asking him to do, and how long I mean, this has been going on for many months. So,
Yeah,
you
he
know,
actually did not really start. It was approved in May, and it was almost end of August that he actually started with some of the excavation. And I told him, I said, I see what you're doing, and I see that you're all trying to get it to the 2 to 1 slope. But you've got to talk to us about where you're starting the slope at. And so that's where we stopped him. And from what Jim and I went there, Wayne and I went there. And
can we know more from the two of you, what your expectations and timelines would be for compliance?
well, it's a site plan modification. So realistically, he has 5 years.
So originally, the concern was that runoff, right? It was, the slope was too.
It's too
He
steep.
removed it,
What he did, he started doing work there because there has always been an icing issue with water coming out of that bank. So he was trying to do something to address that, which we understood that issue. I think that he just started adding more to it and doing more to it. We told him this was back last January. Well, you've got to put this in writing, Tim. You've got to get a plan for us. I don't think he ever really grasped that until I finally went there one day. I said, okay, I'm shutting you down now. You're stopped. I gave him that cease and desist. That's when he went and hired Dave Hughes, who designed the project that he came to us in May. We approved that site modification. And then eventually he started doing the work. Because remember, he took out the landscape area, cut all those trees down. And I said, you can't be doing this. And then May, we approved it. And one of the conditions that we stated was, you have to finish the embankment to our agreeable situation. We wanted to see it stabilized, we want to see it done. And once that's done, then we can take a look at you putting your building up, your Patriots building, at the spot you planned it at.
Okay, but there wasn't a timeline of when you expected that.
No.
So it could technically be 5 years.
Based on his statements, his source of income, if it hasn't dried up already, it will very soon, because he was losing that property that he was painting at to begin with. So hopefully he gets these ducks in a row quickly. Which
He's expressed to us, and unfortunately, I've had to say to him, I didn't do this, you did this.
I understand that part. I'm just to her point,
I can imagine that,
5 years.
that I would say, I would give him until January. If he doesn't submit something, I would give him another cease and desist, because what he's done is not consistent with the plan he gave you.
Okay.
It's also not stabilized. Eventually, he's gonna need to stabilize it and
Jim,
The person doing the work or doing the plan for him is who I reached out to on more than one occasion. And has some frustration with Tim also. But he did say to me, okay, I don't think I can make your January meeting, I believe, or the January 19th date. I can get this, what you guys are looking for, by January 19th.
And to your point, you can't stabilize in January, February, March. So he's not stabilized till the spring.
Right. He did come to us, remember, a short time ago, and he asked us to put the wood chips on and to do this, and we said, no, we're not going to accept that.
Yeah. Jim, could he hydro seed that, and when can you hydro seed? Would
Well,
that
you can hydro
stabilize?
seed anytime you want, but it's not gonna grow until
Right.
March 15th is the earliest you really.
You wouldn't spray it on now.
I told
No,
him,
I mean,
back in October, I said, Tim, you're 6 to 8 months away from even considering building that.
Right. So what's the urgency of stabilizing at this point? Is there a business that might be affected, or the road be affected with it not stabilized?
I mean, really, you should get some silt fence put in.
Which he did.
He did get that in.
Yes. Dave Hughes had him get that.
It's not really eroding badly, because he did put the drainage at the top, and it's not a big drainage area. So it's really not, it was no evidence that it was eroding,
It's not going to collapse. But the fact is, we know that if we tell someone, just do this, and then you get to do this, they won't go forward with the other part.
Right.
And that's,
Sorry, some of the neighbors that live up there, they've been expressing anything.
No.
Quiet.
yes.
Are there houses right behind there, or is that the road and the houses?
It's the houses on Etna Street.
Yeah, they're right there.
So he is up against that residential neighborhood. That's why he has that 40-foot buffer area.
Mhm.
He made mistakes.
He actually
He
needs
just thought he
20,
could cut
50
everything down and dig the hill up, get it to what he wanted to do.
He needs 50 feet, 25, 30-foot buffer, but 50 feet.
Which he's gonna have,
He'll have
which
that.
he's gonna have. He's got that easily. But again, the grading, I said to him, the grading can't start within 15 feet of a property line. On the original plan, you were 40 feet. I think you might be under that 50 feet or 15 feet right now.
So then what's the next step? We wait till January 19th?
Yeah, because I believe at that point, he should have a plan, and if he doesn't,
Or is
then I
that
think we have
cease
to
and
go.
desist without a plan, or cease and desist if he hasn't done more work?
I think if he does more work, or if he doesn't respond to you at the 19th meeting to your satisfaction, then I would give him a cease and desist. Not that he's
cease
gonna
and-
respond to it, but.
But the cease and desist, would that stop him from operating his business, you're saying?
No.
Or
it's
stop
not
him from?
No. It'll prevent him, excuse me, gentlemen, it'll prevent him from violating the provisions of your ordinance, any ordinance or regulation that you say he's violating. That's what the cease and desist will do.
That's what that's what I'm saying. So
Right.
in essence, he is stopped right now doing any further site work.
So he has a cease and desist, did he get one?
He doesn't have an official cease and desist, but my letter to him said, you must stop any site work until you get. I didn't he had a cease and desist before, and then we came to May. I said, at this point, you need to stop your site work, which he's agreed to do. And at this point, put on paper what you've done so far and show us what what we're going to see for the
And
future.
we're supposed to have that today.
Well, I'd asked for today, but that's where I'm speaking with Dave Hughes, his surveyor, was not going to be able to get that done for now. And that was only because I spoke to him only about a week and a half ago. Because I just don't have time to do that for Tim.
Well, if there's no imminent danger or threat to joining property owners, streams, watercourses, wetlands, if you don't feel that way, then perhaps continuing it to January is probably the best course to take at this point.
It's better off than it was a year ago from now.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, well,
It was more in danger of collapse a year ago.
Oh, yeah, ours are there.
What else? Chairman's report, commissioner's comment,
Nothing, sir. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Ellie?
I'm good. Merry
Good.
Christmas, everyone.
Just want to say a few words,
Yeah.
welcome aboard.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Just excited to be here. This is a whole new process for me, but I love to learn. I really was digging into some of the stuff that Ed gave me last week. And I'm just looking forward to having a voice here at this table and learning from everyone.
Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard.
yeah, welcome.
Ed?
Congratulations, everybody, on all of you in your elections, and Francis, congratulations to you. This is you're in a very good group that have a lot of experience, Francis. So you'll learn a lot.
Just my one comment is that Attorney Green wanted to know anything that I bring before the commission, I go to Attorney Fitzpatrick with. So in regard to where he had concerns about how we did our process for the interpretation, I don't do that on my own. I get legal advice. So
Good job. I'm assuming we're all fine.
No worries.
he was bringing, Attorney Green was bringing up things saying, unfortunately.
Boy, you can talk, huh? Wow. Well, you gotta give him the floor.
Jeez.
Hey, all right, gentlemen, that's enough. That's enough. That's enough.
Public comment?
No.
Nope. Well, I'll accept the motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
It's 8:38, Wednesday the 15th.
I said 8:30.